Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the quadratic formula. So the nice part about the quadratic formula is that it works on any quadratic. So even if you can't factor that quadratic, you can still find out what x is equal to. Now, the downside about this method is that it has a lot of just arithmetic in it. Add, subtract, multiply, divide, things like that. So, let's get started. So the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we'll have that next to each of our problems. Now, what's a, b, and c? Well, remember, we have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So remember, you want all of those equations equal to 0. So in this example, we have x squared minus 5x minus 36 equals 0. So it's already in standard form. Now we want to identify what a, b, and c are. So a is the number in front of x squared. So in this case, the number in front of x squared, if nothing is written there, is 1. B is the number in front of x. Make sure to take the sign in front of it. Since I have a minus 5x, that means that b is equal to negative 5. C is the number without an x. Once again, remember to take the sign with it. So since that's minus 36, C is going to be negative 36. So now we want to substitute these values into our formula. So we have x equals, first comes this negative b, or the opposite of b. The opposite of negative 5 is positive 5, plus or minus square root of, b is negative 5, I'm going to put that in parentheses, squared, minus 4 times a is 1, c is negative 36. And this is all over 2 times a, or 2 times 1. So now we're going to solve using order of operations. Now, one thing I want to throw out to you real quick. If you are squaring a negative number here, if you put this into your calculator, you absolutely have to use parentheses around that negative 5. Otherwise, it's going to square the 5 and then take the negative with it. It's not going to actually square negative 5. So make sure you put parentheses around it. Or if you'd rather just kind of, figure it out as you go, write out your arithmetic. We have 5 plus or minus the square root of. Negative 5 squared is positive 25. And then I'll take negative 4, since that's minus 4. I'll take, you know what, never mind. Let's take 4 times 1 times negative 36. 4 times 1 times negative 36 is negative 144. So I have minus 144. So minus a negative is plus a positive. Underneath that, 2 times 1 is 2. So then 25 plus 144 is 169. And we know what the square root of 169 is. That's 13. So now we have two different problems here. We have one where we're going to subtract 5 minus 13 over 2. We're also going to have one where we add 5 plus 13 over 2. So that plus or minus means I have two different answers. So 5 minus 13 is negative 8, divided by 2 is negative 4, So we have x equals negative 4. Then we have 5 plus 13, which is 18, divided by 2 is 9. So x also equals 9. Okay, let's take a look at this next one. So the first thing we want to do is figure out what a, b, and c are. So a is the number on top of x squared, or in front of x squared, that's 1. B is the number in front of x, that's negative 8. C is the number without an x, that's negative 20. So then we're going to substitute everything into our formula. X equals the opposite of b, so the opposite of negative 8 is positive 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 8 squared, don't forget those parentheses, minus 4 times a is 1, c is negative 20, all over 2 times our a is 1. So now we'll start simplifying. 8 plus or minus negative 8 squared is positive 64 minus 4 times negative 20 is negative 80, so I have minus 80 here, over, and then 2 times 1 is 2. Inside of that square root there, I have minus and negative, so that's plus a positive. All right. Plus or minus the square root of. So 64 plus 80, that's also going to give me 144. The square root of 144 is 12. So right now I have x equals 8 plus or minus 12 over 2. Now remember, that means we have two different equations. One where we're going to add 8 and 12 and divide by 2. One where we're going to subtract 8 minus 12 divided by 2. So 8 plus 12 is 20, divided by 2 is 10. So we have x equals 10 for one of our answers. 8 minus 12 is negative 4. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. So our other answer is x equals negative 2. All right, let's look at this next one. Well, over here, our equation isn't equal to 0, right? So we need to fix that. X squared is already positive, so that means we want to bring that negative 5 over to the other side. So we're going to add 5 on both sides. I'm going to go ahead and erase my work from that last problem so I have some room. So now we have 5x squared minus 10x plus 5 equals 0. So now we want to figure out what a, b, and c are. A is the number in front of x squared, so that's 5. B is the number in front of x, so that's negative 10. C is the number without an x, so that's 5. We'll go ahead and plug these into our formula. X equals the opposite of b, so the opposite of negative 10 is positive 10, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 10 squared, don't forget about those parentheses, minus 4 times a is 5, c is 5, all over 2 times a is 5. So now we'll start simplifying. X equals 10 plus or minus the square root of. Negative 10 squared is 100 minus 4 times 5 is also 100 over, and then 2 times 5 is 10. So now when we start simplifying, 100 minus 100, well, that's 0. So I have 10 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 10. Now the square root of 0 is just 0, right? So 10 plus or minus 0 just ends up being the same thing, right? So we just have 10 over 10. 10 divided by 10 is 1. So our answer is going to be x equals 1. All right. Over here. So with this guy, we can actually go ahead. We don't have to worry about a being positive. Remember, we can do this with any quadratic. So let's try that out. A, in this case, is going to be -1, that number in front of x squared. B is going to be -10, that number in front of x. And C is going to be -21, that number in front of, that number that doesn't have an x. I'm sorry. So let's start putting this into our formula. X equals the opposite of b, so the opposite of -10 is +10, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so -10 squared, minus 4 times a is -1, c is -21. All over 2a, or 2 times -1. So we have x equals 10 plus or minus the square root of -10 squared. -10 times -10 is 100, minus 4 times -1 times -21 is 84. All over -2. That's 2 times -1. All right, so we got 10 plus or minus. 100 minus 84 is 16. So we have the square root of 16 here over -2. And we know that the square root of 16 is 4. So we have plus or minus 4. So now we're going to break that up. We're going to have a 10 plus 4 over -2 and a 10 minus 4 over -2. 10 plus 4 is 14, divided by -2 is -7, so we have x equals -7 for one of our answers. 10 minus 4 is 6, 6 divided by -2 is -3. So x also equals -3. Good deal. Over here, we want to get our equation equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and move my x and my -10 over to the other side. So to do that, I'm going to subtract x on both sides. And I'm also going to add 10 to both sides. So over on that left, we'll have x squared plus 7x minus 1x is 6x, and then plus 10 equals 0. We'll figure out what a, b, and c are. A is the number in front of x squared, so that's 1. B is the number in front of x, so that's 6. C is the number that doesn't have an x with it, so that's 10. I'm going to go ahead and erase these pieces that I had on my last problem, so I have room. All right, x equals the opposite of b, so the opposite of +6 is -6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 6 squared, minus 4 times a is 1, c is 10. All over 2a, so all over 2 times 1. All right, so x equals -6 plus or minus the square root of. So 6 squared is 36 minus 4 times 1 times 10 is 40. all over 2 times 1 is 2. Now, when we get to simplifying this square root, and we have 36 minus 40, we end up with the square root of negative 4, right? Well, we learned yesterday that we can't take the square root of a negative number. And if we do try to take the square root of a negative number, that means we have no solution. All right, let's try this next one. So the number in front of x squared is going to be my a value, so that's 1. B is my number in front of x, so that's 4. C is the number that doesn't have an x with it, so that's 1. We'll go ahead and start plugging everything in. X equals the opposite of b, so the opposite of 4 is negative 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 4 squared, minus 4ac, so 4 times 1 times 1, all over 2 times a, so 2 times 1. All right, so now we'll start simplifying. We have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared is 16 minus 4 times 1 is 4. All over 2 times 1 is 2. X equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 4 is 12 over 2. Now, sometimes you can leave it like this if you would like to. I'm honestly fine with that. But real quick, I'm going to show you what sometimes you might see answers on the ACT like this. So we can simplify that square root of 12. I'm going to do that real quick in the corner over here. Oopsies. Square root of 12, that's the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. The square root of 4 is 2. Square root 3. Our numerator has a greatest common factor. That top has a greatest common factor of 2. So we're left with negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 3 in those parentheses. And that's over 2. Those 2's would cancel out. So x would equal negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 3. So if you get an answer like this and your answers don't match anything, you might need to go and simplify. But if you input this with the square root of 12, I'm fine with it. Okay. This next equation is not equal to 0, so we need to fix that. So we need to bring that 20 over to the other side. So that means we need to subtract 20 on both sides. So I'm left with x squared plus x minus 11 equals 0. So now we'll figure out what a, b, and c are. A is the number in front of x squared, so that's 1. B is the number in front of x, so that's 1. C is the number, oopsies, C is the number without an x, so that's negative 11. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and erase my work from that last problem, so that way I have room. So x equals the opposite of b, so the opposite of 1 is negative 1, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 1 squared minus 4ac, so 4 times 1 times negative 11, over 2 times a, or 2 times 1. Negative 1 plus or minus the square root of, so we have 1 minus 4 times 1 times negative 11. So that's negative 44. over 2 times 1 is 2. All right, x equals -1 plus or minus the square root of. Remember, minus a negative is plus a positive, so 1 plus 44 is 45 over 2. So that means we have -1 minus the square root of 45 over 2, -1 plus the square root of 45 over 2. Once again, you can simplify those radicals, but I'm not worried about that today. In the future, you would probably put that into your calculator to get a decimal to graph it anyways, so I wouldn't stress about it. Okay. So over here, for me, it feels good to move that -3x and my 6 over to the other side because I like keeping my x squared positive. So I'm going to add 3x to both sides, and I'm also going to subtract 6 from both sides. So I'm going to end up with, oopsies, that's a little bit too low for me, x squared plus 3x minus 6 equals 0. So we'll figure out what a, b, and c are. A is the number in front of x squared, that's 1. B is the number in front of x, that's 3. C is the number that doesn't have an x with it, that's -6. So we'll plug that into our equation. X equals -b, so -3, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 3 squared, minus 4ac, so 4 times 1 times -6, over 2a, so 2 times 1. So we'll start simplifying. -3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared is 9 minus 4 times 1 times -6 is -24. And then that's going to be over 2 times 1 is 2. So we'll add together those things in the square root. 9 plus 24 is 33 over 2. So I can't simplify anything, so that will be my answer once I split it up. I'll have in x equals -3 plus the square root of 33 over 2. And I'll also have an x equals -3 minus the square root of 33 over 2. So in this equation, remember, we want to get this equal to 0. So we're going to go ahead and subtract that 6x from both sides. So we have 2x squared minus 9x equals 0. So what we're going to have to do, let's figure out what a, b, and c are. So a is the number in front of x squared, that's 2. B is the number in front of x, so that's -9. C is the number without an x. Now, I don't have one of those, so that means C is equal to 0. So let's start solving. X equals the opposite of B, the opposite of -9 is +9, plus or minus the square root of B squared, so -9 squared, plus or minus, not plus or minus, minus 4ac, so a is 2, c is 0, over 2 times a is 2. So x equals 9 plus or minus the square root of -9 squared is 81, and then 4 times 2 times 0 is 0, so 81 minus 0 is just 81, so I'm just going to leave it alone, over And then 2 times 2 is 4. Now we've got 9 plus or minus. The square root of 81 is 9. And then we'll put that over 4. So now we'll break that into 2 different equations. We'll have one with 9 plus 9 divided by 4. And in the other one, we'll have 9 minus 9 divided by 4. Now, 9 plus 9 divided by 4, that's 18 over 4. Both of those numbers are even, so I can divide them both by 2. So we'll get 9 halves. So one of my answers is 9 over 2, or 9 halves. On the bottom, 9 minus 9 is 0. 0 divided by 4 is 0. So my other answer is going to be x equals 0. All right, good deal. See you guys later.